The U.S. military has had a relationship with the nation's top universities since the 1950s. President Reagan solidified the effort to educate military leaders with graduate degrees during the Cold War. Now the Pentagon is rethinking that relationship, accusing the Ivy League and others of being too woke. Chief National Security Correspondent Jennifer Griffin has details tonight.
With some exceptions, the Ivy League as a whole has pervasive institutional bias and a lack of viewpoint diversity.
Pentagon Chief Pete Hegseth is giving the military services until Friday to review the department's long-standing partnerships with the nation's top universities, a move that could cut graduate programs for active duty service members. Earlier this month, Hegseth announced the Pentagon would be cutting ties with Harvard.
Too many of our officers came back looking too much like Harvard. Heads full of globalist and radical ideologies that do not improve our fighting ranks.
Secretary Hegseth has degrees from Princeton and Harvard. The Army has flagged 34 universities at risk of being barred from tuition aid, including MIT, Carnegie Mellon, Duke, Johns Hopkins, Emory, Florida Tech, and all of the Ivies except Dartmouth. Retired Rear Admiral Mark Montgomery, a Penn graduate, served as the Navy's Director of Operations in the Pacific.
It's a very counterproductive proposal by the secretary. Look, I didn't agree with my faculty a lot of the time, but I actually found that gives you critical thinking skills.
Lieutenant Colonel Tim Ryman, an active duty Marine currently at Yale, wrote an open letter to Secretary Hegseth urging him to reconsider. The students I engaged with today will very likely become tomorrow's journalists, policymakers, and business leaders. They are future members of Congress who will vote on defense budgets and authorizations for military force. The service academies like West Point and the Naval Academy don't have graduate schools in STEM, computer science, engineering, and graduate degrees in law or medicine. Hegseth says it may be cheaper to send active duty military to state universities.
Hello, Bobby Jones here from Midas Touch and Valor Media Networks. In the clip you just saw, the Department of Defense, led by Secretary of Defense Pete Hegseth, have announced a new policy to basically have America's senior military officers stop attending some of America's most elite and prestigious academic institutions. Now, the way this is being framed by the current administration is that it's a pushback against, quote, elitism, unquote. But the complete irony of this move is the very people who are claiming to push back against elitism are the very ones who are not only part of that system in that world, but have benefited greatly from it. In this video, I just want to talk about how the pursuit of knowledge, even in the United States military, is not something to be taken for granted. It's actually vital to the proper development of a military force, and even more importantly, gives that military force context on what their powers are and how it's to integrate with the international world. First, let's get this out the way right now. The blatant hypocrisy of such a move, led by Donald John Trump, a man who goes out of his way to let people know that he graduated from the University of Pennsylvania, or as he likes to say, the Wharton School. Now, for those of us who live in the United States, we understand that there's a difference between graduating from the University of Pennsylvania, which is a fabulous elite Ivy League school, and its venerated Wharton School of Business with an MBA. There's a distinct market difference. Trump likes to say Wharton because he wants to blend in the fact that, hey, he graduated from Penn, but did not necessarily get that prestigious MBA. But he uses it as a way to show how intelligent he is, or tries to be perceived as. He also mentions how his uncle was a professor at MIT, etc., etc. So the very person who is supposedly pushing this agenda has benefited from being a member of that elite class, and even exaggerating what he actually accomplished there. But he's not the only one. Pete Hegseth, the man who famously in 2022 sent his Harvard degree back, what people fail to realize is that was his graduate degree. He's a two-time elite university participant because he also graduated at Princeton University undergraduate level. And so he went to Princeton and Harvard and went into the United States military as an officer And even with that kind of elite educational background, was seen as a subpar officer, failing to get company command even as an 04. For those of us in the military, we know what that means. That means you weren't ready to lead. You're not good enough to lead, despite having the elitist of the most elite educational experience. And it just doesn't stop with those two. You can go all around the Trump cabinet and just see all of these Ivy Leagues, Harvard, Yale, Princeton, Penn, thrown out there as justification for their positions. But if you look at the current state of the United States, the degradation of the economy, of the diplomatic arm of the United States, and hey, the military being used to do things that it typically should not do, the diplomats should actually be doing it. That's a key sign. Why? Why is this a big deal? Well, exposure matters, especially when training people how to possibly conduct war. War is political, it's economical, and it's also technological. Officers need to have access to upper tier thinkers. They need to be part of communities that are highly academic and looking at how moves that they may make or may be responsible for will have ripple effects immediately, midterm, and long term. And that vital cross section of being at elite universities with people who are subject matter experts in a variety of things that military officers are exposed to can make the difference between, hey, having a limited engagement where there are strategic goals that are mapped out and everything falls according to plan, or creating a quagmire that we have seen over the years in various areas. But being exposed to different ways of thinking, being exposed to different ways of seeing the same problem are vital, especially when you're talking about people who are ordering people around and have the fate of their lives in their hands. Winning wars requires ideas. Winning the peace requires the proper execution of those ideas. When you look at something like the Manhattan Project that famously created the nuclear bomb, that was an academic and military strategic partnership, an alliance that literally changed the world. Now, in that case, it brought about destruction mankind didn't even think was possible. However, when you take into account academics and military from a Cold War